Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of the Livable Planet Film Festival put on by SF Indie Fest. We're really excited to be able to kind of share this kind of mixture of environmental, nature, wildlife, and just who knows what films from around the world. One of the things we found as we put on our other two festivals, SF Indie Fest and SF Doc Fest, is that there were a lot of interesting films that kind of dealt with environmental issues that we really wanted audiences to be able to kind of experience. And so when we ran across this film, Overland, that you had a chance to just see or about to kind of jump into, we knew we wanted to kind of have it in the mix. And we're lucky enough to have the directors Elizabeth James and Revere Lanou here. So welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So maybe a good place to kind of jump into this is that I think people often wonder like how filmmakers discover their story. And given the kind of adventures that you had to go on, how did you know that this was like the film that you both wanted to make?
Well, that's a long and convoluted story, but Revere and I are a married couple and we don't always work together, but we started talking about making a film about falconry, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years ago. Before that, we had met some falconers in the swamps of Arkansas and were sort of intrigued by the idea. And, we started doing some research. Revere's a painter and an artist, so he had some images that he had found, and we started doing research and realized that it was a UNESCO World Heritage and that it was practiced all over the world and it's been done for 6,000 years. And we said, well, this could be kind of an epic movie and a great adventure. And we dove in. I
think too, there was sort of almost two phases to it. One was figuring out the topic and finding out, like Elizabeth said, that it's such a rich topic with so much history and depth. And then once we decided, hey, this isn't just going to be kind of a narrated description of the art form, we wanted it to be a living, breathing thing with characters. Once we found Khalifa first, then Lauren, then Giovanni. And once we found these three people and began to excavate their lives and their relationship to falconry, then we knew what movie we had. It was like first here's falconry as a topic. Oh, here's Overland.
Well, it's interesting how you ran across this story, and it seems like you couldn't quite just forget it. It's like it kind of kept on bringing you down the rabbit hole of like wanting to know more and more. I remember, I'd met Elizabeth at a film festival many years ago, I think maybe when you were first starting on kind of development or maybe early production. And I know one of the questions I had in my mind at the time where I was like, man, I need to see, what becomes of this film. This will be, exciting. But like, I was like, how do you as a filmmaker kind of capture the sport? And, what are your approaches? And so like, what were some of the kind of interesting ways that you wanted to kind of visually kind of capture and kind of put you in the middle of all these things going on?
First thing that comes to my mind, we did write a grant for the National Endowment of Humanities Bridging Cultures grant, and grants aren't necessarily our favorite thing in the world, but what they do ask you to do is have a plan, a comprehensive plan. And as we were putting the ideas together for the film, our visual concept was epic, intimate, and textured. And we felt like this movie, with the grandeur of the landscapes and the bird, required an epic approach. We also wanted to get into the intimacy of sort of the psychology between the human and the bird. And then the textured was really paying attention and immersing in the cultures and understanding the subtleties, or at least trying to convey some of the subtleties and nuances in the culture. So then that kind of thread was almost a policy throughout even our selection of lenses and use of drones. So we wanted to provide really wide, dramatic sort of shots of the landscape, all the way through to macro shots of feathers to give people vantage points they hadn't seen before.
And that makes it sound all neat and tidy in a way that it wasn't, because you're also dealing with wild animals. And you can have the best laid plans for a day, but a bird might decide to sit in a tree for 5 hours, and you can't do anything about it. So we had to build a crew that was really nimble and flexible and able to sort of pivot and tell the story that was presenting itself, and sort of give up, in a lot of ways the falconer has to give up control to the bird, and we had to then give up control to the bird and the falconer, because the safety of the birds was important to us, and not doing too much in a day. I think all three of our characters are drawn to this relationship with the bird because they like to be in the wild. And so there was a certain tax that being with a film crew extolled upon them, and they we wanted to be respectful and make sure that they had enough alone time between our intensive sessions. But plus, we were oftentimes in countries where we weren't speaking the native language, and we were relying on, crews that we had a core crew that we traveled with, but then we always hired people from the culture locally to consult with us and to be with us. And so making sure that we weren't missing major things was the other content thing, where it was I'm not quite sure exactly what's happening, but I think we're supposed to get in the car and follow that guy.
It's funny you say the thing about neat and tidy, like the best laid plans. And I was thinking one of the times where our crew, maybe all of us, weren't on our total A game was actually shooting this million-year-old skull, which didn't move, and it didn't bite, and it didn't bleed, and it didn't run away. And it was just sitting there, and it was indoors in this room. And I think we were just there was no reaction. It was all of our decisions. And it almost, I love the shoot. I love the footage we got of it, but it was funny that it was almost too controlled for us to handle.
Well, yeah, I guess you violated the number one rule of Hollywood, right? Of don't work with kids or animals,
Yes.
It's one of those tropes you hear about, and then, then you do it and you're like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
What do you think, with this kind of art, the sport, having gone on for, 6,000 years, I think you said, what is it that you think that's so many things have kind of come and gone during that time. What do you think that makes this so timeless, and why it was considered so important then, for it to kind of fall into these kind of UNESCO rules?
Well, I think it's important to remember that first and foremost, it is a form of hunting. And hunting is something that has sustained us since the beginning of, humanity. And so part of its survival is based on the fact that we needed it for quite some time. Before the advent of gunpowder, falconry was extremely widespread. Excuse me. Falconry was extremely widespread in all of Europe, and certainly Mongolia and the Middle East. And it wasn't very long ago that the falcon kept the Bedouin tribes alive in the desert. So there's that. But then I think on a modern level, it's a portal that gives you access to things that you probably could never see if you just went out bird watching. For example, you'd have to get extraordinarily lucky to see an eagle kill a hare, or to see even a merlin predate on dragonflies. So I think that it draws people that want to be part of that cycle in. Wouldn't you agree? I don't know.
I think I completely agree with that. And I also think that you're, submitting to the church of nature, if you will, that unlike dogs or horses, where you're basically controlling what they do and you train them. These birds, people use the word training, but essentially it's just working out a partnership. At the end of the day, every time the bird leaves a falconer's fist, there's no strings. It can just fly away. 100% it can fly away, live on its own, hunt on its own. There's no dependency there. And so I think people like the fact that the bird comes back voluntarily to them, and that they are submitting, to the bird's will and to whatever happens in nature. I think there's a real rush in that, because we can control so much of what goes on in our lives, especially, with screens and things, that this is just let it go, and whatever happens.
You know, it makes me think, and I ask this question just because I'm sure that someone in our audience would want to ask it. You know, is that you know, humans' relationships with animals? You know, there's a whole spectrum of the way that people feel. You know, and so like, you know, as you were making this film, I mean, did some people sometimes feel that the birds were you know not being mistreated, but like in the sense of like, did they feel that the the sport wasn't kind of people, or like, what would you say? I mean, you spent so much time with the birds and the people. It's like, what are kind of some of the misimpressions sometimes people have about that relationship, between the animal and the handler?
Oh gosh, I think the first thing is probably success rate. You know, even in the wild, a raptor only catches its prey 1 out of 10 times, maybe. So
Oh wow.
yeah, like it's not, at least for the characters that we featured in the film, we didn't feel like it was so much about the result of the hunt as the intent of the hunt, if that makes any sense. And I think, yeah, there are people who look at falconry in different cultures as a blood sport or as something that should be banned. And I think that if they went and spent some time with falconers, they might feel differently, because it's, you know, it's something that really requires you to be present and be in a place and understand all of the different elements, from the wind and the sun to the earth and the prey. And it's very different than other forms of hunting in that way. But I don't know, I'm sure there are people who are critical of it, but at the same time, I think that if we sort of shy away from those topics, we miss out on experiencing a whole sort of way of life and living in nature.
I remember when we were first getting started on this, we went to the North American Falconry Association meet, and I walked in this hotel room and this hotel hallway, and saw all these people with their roller bags and falcons on there, which we kind of show you a little bit of in the movie. And speaking to this gentleman, and he's talking to me about his red-tailed hawk, and they've been partners for many, many years. And it was the first hawk that I got to kind of like see as an individual with a name. And then 2 days later, he had this really sad look on his face. I think he was at the bar, and, the hawk died while hunting. And I said, do you mind if I ask you, how that happened? And he said that he was hunting a rabbit, and the rabbit kicked the hawk in the chest and, broke its chest cavity.
Wow.
And it's just one of those things where you're going, whoa, and for that, for people who are in this world, that's part of it. There's you say blood sport, but nature is a blood sport, whether we like it or not. It's not a sport, it's a survival for these animals. And Lauren talks about that a little bit in the movie, but we might forget that every predator out there makes a living by killing, and that's not comfortable to some people, but it's the reality.
I think in a lot of ways too, it was a reminder to me personally, as we went through the journey of the film, how sort of divorced we've become from the source of our food, and how it might seem like buying chicken in the supermarket that's neatly packed up or whatever it is one thing, but hunting it is another. But I came to sort of feel entirely the opposite about the way that we procure our meat and our food. It just seemed like a much more natural, real way to live. So it's a complicated question. I'd love to hear from people who don't think that it's the right thing to do, because I'd be curious after seeing the film if they still feel that way, or what. I'm not interested in changing people's mind. That's not really the kind of film we made. But it's one of those things where I think if you make art to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one.
I think you all have made not only a really gorgeous film, but one that, you enjoy spending time with these, characters, and just like, being a filmmaker myself, I'm just like the patience of the people to, let there be a crew around and, do these things is I, really appreciative for the time that you all spent capturing these stories, but also the people in the film for kind of pulling a little bit of curtain back on this life that many of us don't get to experience, Um,
Yeah,
it
they're
is,
kind of the real heroes. They're pretty brave.
yeah, I mean, and I know that you guys spent
We're
We
losing
can't hear
you.
you.
Can you start us? So we lost your question.
and I think we're back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the, I know you all spent, a couple years, making the film. Like, how did technology change to kind of allow some of the ways you are to kind of capture the storytelling? I'm just even thinking about like the evolution of drones over the last couple of years. And so, like, were there certain things that at the beginning of the film you're just like, I don't even know if we can do this, and then like the technology changed enough where you're like, okay, we can go get it, or drones are such a part of documentary filmmaking now, but I think you guys use it in a unique way. Like, how did you see kind of drones as your tools? And
Well, I mean, I will say we started shooting the film in 4K and ended shooting the film in 8K. So that was a big change over the course of our film, and it created a whole lot of data and media management minor crises along the way. But the drones you should really speak about, because I drone days make me so nervous.
Yeah, we sort of divided and conquered a lot of this film. I guess when someone mentioned to us, oh, this is a perfect drone film, we had never shot with a drone. And I guess as part of being a visual artist is every time you pick up a tool, you want to say, why am I using that tool rather than another tool, whether it's a brush or whatever else? And so why a drone rather than another camera? And the drone's ability to change perspective so rapidly, to be able to cover ground, from 3 feet up to 300 feet up and swivel in 360 degrees. We really wanted to stay away from the kind of overarching like airplane shot and try to tell stories with each drone shot, especially given the amazing landscapes that we had. And then of course the whole time, hopefully there's this echo that birds are able to make these exact same flights, and they're not limited by fences or roads or things like that, which leads me to the third component of what you said about kind of technology. Is one thing we did is step back and really, we had a conversation with E.O. Wilson, who's a great conservationist and natural thinker, and talked to him about what were the ethics of framing out power lines and framing out fences and man-made things, and was that okay? He thought about it for a little bit and said, absolutely, frame it out, show the world that we could have, that we want to have. And so a lot of times when people say that they think the film is beautiful, I think in some ways that's our craft, but in other ways it's just not seeing the things that kind of crush the magic a little bit in our environment.
That's an interesting thing to think about. And I give you guys props for, actually investigating that and reflecting on, those choices. I don't know if that would have been an obvious one to me, but like for you guys to really do that, I think is really insightful.
Yeah, I mean, we had Revere is a painter and an artist, and so he brings a special kind of aesthetic to the film. And we had so many conversations. We had a terrific DP named Ben Pritchard, who, when we first met him, was based in Dubai, but is now based in London. And we would spend hours and hours and hours talking about our aesthetic and what we were trying to convey and how this landscape required this lens and not that lens. And it was very deliberate in that sense. We didn't want to just sort of run and gun and show up and then be forced to react. We tried to do a ton of research before we landed so that we had the tools that we needed. But that said, like the first day in Azerbaijan, the gimbal that attached to the car, which is one of the technologies that we didn't have in the beginning of the film, broke. And so you saw those scenes where they're driving, chasing the birds and chasing the hubara through this crazy landscape. And if you're trying to hold a camera in the car, it's going to make everyone in the audience vomit. So and you can't just get a gimbal fixed in like the middle of nowhere, Azerbaijan, shockingly.
Yeah, I remember when it broke, and my team, I wasn't in the car, I was in one of the other cars, and my team came to me with this sort of like broken gimbal, basically saying that you can't fly a drone in Azerbaijan for legal reasons. Basically showing us that half of our camera system was broken. And I said, oh, you know what? There are mechanics. If it's just a gimbal, they could probably solder together the pieces. And so they took it to one of the mechanics, and they're like, this is made of some sort of graphite fiber, thing, that metal that these people have never seen in their lives. They cannot, it's not tin. And so that was out. But we did have a plan. I think as a filmmaker, you'll appreciate this, that we were going to change locations so much, going from Scotland to Dubai, that we actually needed to push our look a little bit stronger, so that going from one frame to the other would feel like it's steady across it. And we didn't want to have a style for Dubai and a style for Scotland. It had to feel consistent across continents and years.
And characters. Yeah, it was an insane undertaking in the edit room.
I can only imagine, especially with the 4K and the 8K situation.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we did have proxies, but the up-resing of the film was slightly miraculous. Let's just say that.
Nice. Well, as we wrap this up, I think, one of the things that, we as film festivals really want is like, we want to kind of help amplify the voice of our filmmakers and you and the audience that, we're lucky enough to kind of experience these films early on in the run. So what are ways that like we in the audience can kind of like help spread the word about the film and kind of follow your future efforts?
Well, thanks. That's great. Yay. We love that. So we have a Facebook page, Overland Movie, and an Instagram account. And what we'd especially like, though, is if you have questions or comments, or the film moved you in any way, because we're not there the way we would prefer to be in a real audience to connect with you over, a cocktail after the film, or in the lobby, or in the theater. We have a comment form on our website, which is overlandmovie.com. So if you go on the website and you'd like to reach out to us, we really actually love hearing from people, because as you know, these pandemic film festivals have you putting your content out there and not having any concept of how it's being received. And so it means a lot to us when people reach out with additional questions or comments, or how the film moved them or didn't. But mostly we get.
I kind of liken it to, just in trying to explain the emotion to people of making the film. Imagine, you're an Olympic diver, and you're climbing these ladders and getting to the really, really high platform, which is the making of the film. You get to the end of the diving board, which is you're finally going to release it. You jump off the diving board to release your film, and then there's no pool. You just, we're just in this free fall right now. And so anytime people take the time to write us with their ideas or comments, it gives like a little bit of water to, to kind of, to feel like we've made something that people can connect to, that makes our project feel more real.
Yeah. But the plans for the film, hopefully in the fall at some point, we'll be doing some sort of a theatrical run, followed by, a streaming release. And so we'll be out there. And if you have people that you think would love to see the film, definitely put them in touch with us via one of those platforms, because we'll be making big announcements in the next several months.
Very cool. So I just ask for, all there in the audience to kind of do a few things. If you love this movie, kind of, share about it on Facebook, like the Overland page. And if you have a chance, go to overlandmovie.com and, share some comments with both Elizabeth and Revere. And just like, we're lucky enough that filmmakers, are willing to share their films with you in this. And basically we're their street marketing team. So if we can kind of just like hype it up and, some other people have a chance to discover the film, just a livable planet. So thanks again for being here, guys. And obviously we wish you the best with the
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
We're-
Looking forward to seeing some of the films at the